Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this lovely city and to this conference. And of course, to present my work in lexicography. So my talk, the title is focused on responsive dictionaries, but I sort of also decided to throw in to try to answer the questions that are posed by the conference title. So sort of the first part will try to address one aspect of that, and then the user aspect will be sort of connecting everything. So as Klaas already mentioned, I'm a sort of a hybrid person employed by two institutions which are very complementary in their work. So one part of my work is being involved in this European project that you probably already know. And my second part is working at the University of Ljubljana at Center for Language Resources and Technologies. And this is where we focus on lexicographic research and lexicographic so producing dictionaries and other resources for the Slovene language. So, going to the title of the conference, it's a very provocative title, and I think it deserves a lot of attention, especially this day and age when lexicography is rapidly changing. And I also allowed to add another sort of subtitle, sort of how, because I think that's is very much connected. And in fact, I would argue, and I will try to prove throughout the talk, that it's actually that these two subtopics are connected. So when we ask why, we actually need to ask for whom. And when we ask by who, it's also answers how. So why? To first address that, we need to go actually back to the very seminal work by Sue Atkins and Michael Randell, and they said that it's actually the dictionary should always keep the users in mind. So when dictionary makers should always plan their dictionaries from the users. And this brings an important question for the lexicographers in different countries, namely, how well do we actually know our users? And in the NL action, we had the opportunity to talk among each other. And I also did a quick sort of, let's say, state of the art. So this map shows the level of how user research is developed across Europe. So the greener it is, the better it is. So there's not a lot of green, which means that we have a few countries where user research is well developed. We know that in England, of course. In Germany, it's quite established as well. They have a center for user research at the Institut für Deutsche Sprache. It's also quite well developed in Poland and in Slovenia, but in different areas. So in Poland, focused on bilingual dictionaries, and in Slovenia, it has picked up on the monolingual side. And this means that there is a gap to be addressed at the user research end. And how to address that, I'll go back to the title of my talk. So the one requirement is that it needs to bring lexicographers together. And I have a sort of a case study where this was very successful. So many of you here were part of the NL cost action, which started in 2013. And it included pretty much all the countries in Europe, but more importantly, it included many institutions. So here you can see a map of all the institutions that were involved in NL. And if it hasn't been for NL, the survey of dictionary use, which has now been put into a paper published in the IGL, and it's freely available for the entire 2019. So the entire year this the OUP has opened the access. And this is where the researchers came together, and we decided let's make the same survey across Europe. And I don't have time to go into details to present all the results, but one important thing is when we ask about why make dictionaries, whether there's need for them, it's important to know how the users perceive them. So when we ask the users, and I'm trying to use some Scandinavian or Nordic theme here, so it will be European average, Slovenia, and then the countries from the Nordic regions then participated in the survey. So what you can see here that we asked them what does the monolingual dictionary represent to users, and you can see that it's not really a national symbol in many countries. It's not a special resources that much or something mostly academics care about, but the users mainly perceive it as being useful for general public, but also in different countries, in some countries, exhaustive knowledge of language more than in the others. You can find your own country, hopefully here. The one thing that also the point I'm trying to make here is that there are differences between countries. So you find differences in some of the answers, and of course they reflect the situation in the country. We also try to detect whether it depends on the size of the country, so whether the smaller languages will have different answers, but we couldn't find any statistically significant results. Now, just to stay with some of these results, one of the things that I went to one of the presentations yesterday. There was some analysis of the Swedish dictionary. I don't speak Swedish, but I could understand several things. But here you can see that the digital media have really picked up. So the users very much prefer the digital media. In the European average, I must stress that there's still paper in several countries quite used, but again that reflects the situation in the country, because there are countries across Europe where sometimes even only paper dictionaries are available. Now, back to what the attitude towards dictionaries. We asked a question, we tried to get a situation where the users would show their attitude, and one of the situations we put was, if you find a relatives dictionary, a paper dictionary, what do you do with it? And here, sort of, there were more answers, but we conflated them into three groups. So one is, I keep and use it. The other one was, I get rid of the dictionary, and the third one was, I keep it but not use it. Sort of, I put it on the shelf. So you see again, according to the European average, there's a bit of difference. So like in countries like Denmark and Finland, people are more inclined to get rid of the dictionary, the paper dictionary, whereas in Slovenia, Finland, and many other countries that are not listed here, they actually keep and use it. Now, to go a bit further in this answer, the question was, one of the options was I throw it away. So actually, I don't recycle it, I don't sell it, I actually throw it away. And this is, you can see the starking difference. Now see, the European average is sort of quite low, but you see some spikes, also Nordic spikes. So Denmark, that means nearly 20% of the users actually said they would throw it away, which sends a message, which also tells us something about how they are used to using dictionaries in those countries. And of course, the important message again here is there are very significant differences among countries. And finally, the question that was also important was, what are some of the preferred characteristics, and the users had to sort of rank them. So The more to the right, the higher up on their list of priorities. So you can see that reliable content is in the first position, expectedly, and also in line with the previous surveys conducted in this area. So this was not that unexpected, but again, to point out some of the differences. First, for example, in Italy, you already see that up-to-date content is similarly important as reliable content. Then in Romania, actually, the up-to-date content has already overtaken. And then North Macedonia, it doesn't look that different, but reliable content is here. So you have to look really closely. And this, again, this is not to be just sort of, it has to be looked at from the perspective of the situation in the country, but it shows these differences. Now, so what's the point I'm trying to make here is that lexicography around Europe, it's very heterogeneous, but there are similarities as well between the users, so their habits and needs, between the state of the art of the lexicography, so we have similarities, but we also have this diapason between countries already working on born digital dictionaries, and then on the other side, countries that are still working on paper only or just retro-digitizing dictionaries. And finally, there are also these similarities and differences between lexicographic practices. Now, when we talk about similarities, we have to ask ourselves, surely we must have shared problems among each other sort of around Europe, and which means that there is an opportunity to present joint solutions. And so this brings me to bringing lexicographers together continued, or part 2. And this is what happened after the COSTEN election. So the Alexis, the European infrastructure project, was approved in 2017. And these are some of the facts here. So it's led by the institute I work at in Slovenia. And there are 17 partners, but more encouragingly, and there are 20 confirmed observers and more at the application stage. So we received already several applications. So this map now reflects the current status of the actions, so partners and observers combined. The red one, the big red dot of Sweden will soon be filled because we received the application from Sweden as well. So we are trying to get everybody, just like in NL, again on board, but this time we have funds to also do research to build the infrastructure. And the goals are important to say that exactly integrate, extend, and what I'm stressing also here several times is harmonize national and regional efforts in the field of lexicography, both modern and historical. So different fields of lexicography. And we're trying to create a sustainable infrastructure and get access to high quality lexical data, and importantly also bridge the gap between sort of less under-resourced or lesser resourced communities and let's say more advanced communities. And this is the impacts that are anticipated. So the main point here is that there is a new type of lexicography at the end of the project that no longer views languages as isolated entities, or sort of that brings lexicographers from different countries together. And I want to give you just an example of this, of how activities are benefiting lexicographers. So here we did a survey among lexicographers of their practices, of their needs, and we wanted to have a good overview of what the state of the art is and what sort of needs they anticipate short-term, long-term. And this was completed by 159 lexicographers. They were mainly from Europe, but some were also from other continents. And just one of the answers that points to, again, this heterogeneous nature of lexicography is, what systems do lexicographers use? And we got a long list, and most of them, or over half of them, they use both dictionary writing system and corpus query system, but they use very different ones. So you have a list here, some of the most popular systems that were listed. Importantly, for example, the dictionary writing systems, there are some developed in-house, there are some developed, there are some that are commercial, and then also the open source system. And the common model at the moment is that it's an in-house dictionary writing system and commercial corpus query system. That's the most frequent combination. And then the second part, the second question that was asked was, what are the wishes and needs for these, for software and tools? Of course, the list of needs is longer than I could put here, so I've just put the most often mentioned. So of course, if I read everything, free, online, fast, open source, browser independent, intuitive, easy to maintain. It's a nice wish list. It's but it's a valid request. That's the lexicographers need that to work effectively. And then it's an important point is also interoperability with other resources, and things like customizability, API access, proper documentation, very important, and support for collaborative work. And one thing that's really stressed here, something we paid attention to, was integration of corpus query system and dictionary writing system. Now this is something I'm happy to report that we already are addressing. So I don't know if you're familiar with Lexonomy. This is a dictionary writing, an open source dictionary writing system, and currently within the Action we are building a community that is developing it, or taking it further. And one feature is already available, so you can already access the corpus query system, in this case Sketch Engine, but it will enable linking to other tools, where you can call information like corpus examples, collocations, or synonyms. And this is being tested and upgraded. And when I mentioned the community, this is the GitHub where the community sort of meets. And we have sort of two types of users. One are lexicographers reporting issues, reporting wishes. So this is where you can state your list. This is actually open, so anyone can join. And the other one is developers who then take a look at that and see, so for example, what is then the priority of that wish, whether it's actually a bug within the system. So it's actually sort of community responding to the community. And so these are the other tools that are also available. So at the time, so the Sketch Engine is available to academic institutions in the EU till the end of the project at least. And we have also developed some other tools which are not really directly helpful in terms of building dictionaries, but are helpful in this respect. The Lexifinder is a tool that helps you search through the scientific output in lexicography. So the aim is, at the moment, there's about 1,500 papers in it, but the aim is to put all the lexicographic literature in the tool. So if you're interested in a topic like etymology, you would type in a search and you would find all the papers around the world on etymology. And we would hope that also the this conference's proceedings would be included, or anything that's also related to the lexicography in the Nordic region. So this is the sort of example of how we would, let's say, bring lexicographers together. Now, to be a bit more concrete now, to go back to the users, so when we ask by who and how, if I had asked by who, in the beginning everybody would have said, of course, by lexicographers. So dictionaries should be made by lexicographers. But I will show here that this answer is not always as clear-cut. So here, to present the Slovenian case, I need to give you a bit of background. So the first thing, since 1990s, we have been in the need of resources that would reflect the modern Slovene. Especially lexicography has developed, state-of-the-art tools have appeared, and all that needed to be implemented in the production of the resources for Slovene. So there are four sort of problems currently faced by the community. Is that the existing language data is not accessible to the entire community, to the research community. There is no description of modern Slovene. So there are dictionaries, but they don't describe the modern Slovene. And there is no unified concept of standardization on the levels of grammar, dictionary, orthography. So they're not, those resources are not unified. And finally, there is no model for constant vocabulary monitoring. So we don't have a model implemented yet that would monitor language change. Of course, there are ideas and solutions envisaged. One thing is, of course, that at the center where I work, we started developing resources, but also thinking a bit more in line what's happening around Europe. So one thing is that we want to have a digital dictionary database, which means that there's interoperability between the resources. There is also the need for human users and the computers envisaged. So we need to have data in some standard, and this is very much in line what Elex's infrastructure is trying to achieve. So if the data is prepared according to some standard, it's easily linkable not only within the language but also with other languages. So we are trying to this. If I just sort of show the data model briefly. So this is there are different resources at the top that are. So this is the user end, but at the bottom, sort of background, are the resources that are developed. They are all connected in one centralized database, and so you can imagine that, for example, if there's some change made in the dictionary of collocations, it's actually, if that data is present in the other resources, it's also updated. So you don't have 5, 6 different teams or dictionaries being developed in parallel and not knowing about one another. So everything is taken from one centralized database. The second thing that we have always wanted to implement and have been implementing them regularly is that we use sort of optimization and automation. So we use the method that have been developed in lexicography, have been around for several years now, and you also structure the data model accordingly. And the good thing is that any improvement in these methods results in the improvement of tools and the database. So for example, if we have automatic extraction of linguistic data, we save also the data that is deemed bad. So, for example, I worked a lot with the examples, dictionary examples. So when we had the list of examples and we said, oh, these are bad examples, we don't just delete them, we actually save them, and then we learn from them. So when we have to analyze examples again, we already know what the characteristics of bad examples are. And in that way, the tools are improved. And this is actually, going back to the Elexis survey, this is actually done by other institutions already. So this is, the question here was, what are the parts of the dictionary that you automatically, so the data that you automatically extract. And this is the list, so it starts with the headword list, but also collocations, frequency information, multi-word expressions, examples, and so forth. So this is already worked on, and it's sort of, people want to use these methods more and more because it saves time to lexicographers. Now we get to the user part again. So one thing to stress here, that of course we want these resources to be open access, which means that the community can use them and make other tools or make other things useful for users from them. And that it's sort of, I think especially in smaller languages, it's very important that the community has access to this products. And dictionary users and crowdsourcing, this is something we have been investigating since we started planning this. So the question was always, can we get users sort of on board, or try? Can we get sort of help from them, because the users always want to participate, and so the question was how to integrate the user power, if in our case, in the improvement of language resources. So if we talk about user involvement in dictionary compilation briefly, it's been around for a long time. So you probably are familiar with the OED's reading program. So people have always contributed. They were sending the examples of words, they were sending new words. So this is still used by many institutions. So the dictionary welcomes feedback. So find a mistake, send us feedback. Have a new word, send us feedback. Things like that. So that is used, but it's limited mainly to that. Now the digital media and something that has come out from the natural language processing community was crowdsourcing. So this is a different notion, slightly different. These are 3 points are important. So to explain the difference between the user contributions, like the sending feedback, to crowdsourcing, the difference is that the tasks must be really simple. So something that even a non-language expert can do. Normally they are just limited to sort of yes, no, I don't know, or something like that. And importantly, the results are cumulative, which means that it's not individuals contributing, it's the group. So if, let's say, 100 people say the same thing, it's very likely that there's some substance to it, rather than if 100 people disagree. And one important thing, when you ask yourself, why would we bring users to help us make dictionaries? I think there's one important thing. It facilitates the compilation, but also the promotion. So if users have a personal interest in the dictionary, they will definitely use it more. They will definitely recommend it to others more, and they will feel that they are more part of this lexicographic world. And I will show you 2 examples. I mean, in our case, it was much more urgent as well, because we were making dictionaries from scratch. That's an important note to make. So first of all, the first resource I would like to present is the Thesaurus of Modern Slovene. Now this resource, it was published last March, And it contains over 100,000 headwords, 368,000 synonyms, 3,300,000 collocations, and 2.5 million corpus examples. It's the largest open access collection of Slovene synonyms, and importantly, it was fully automatically generated from existing resources. So it was generated from an English-Slovenian dictionary, also considering corpus data. There's a detailed article about this in the Proceedings of ELEX 2017 by Simon Krek and others. And one important element that was added was that users can help clean the noise, so as we call it, in the data and contribute new synonyms to the resource. So let me show you how that actually looks. So this is how the interface, you can see the synonyms being listed. There are 3 different sections. One are sort of the near synonyms, one are a bit more not core. So the first ones are core, the second one are slightly more distant, and the third group is the user contributions. So here you can already see, okay, the first thing to mention that every 2 synonyms can be compared with collocations. So here you can see that these collocations are common to Moder and Pametan, which means wise and smart. So you can get a view of common collocations, you can get a view of the collocations that are typical for wise only, and the collocations that are typical to smart only. And then the user part happens at this part here. So first of all, users can vote on each synonym. So they can say, yeah, this is a good synonym or not. So upvote, downvote. And more importantly, they can contribute their own synonyms. So they can type in a synonym, type in their name or their nickname or whatever they want. Some prefer to stay anonymous, some prefer actually to say their proper name. But an important addition here is that the community can then vote on their suggestions. And actually this works pretty well. So users can contribute and then others can say what they think about it. So this brings us to the definition, or what we called the responsive dictionary, and it has many different characteristics, not only this user involvement, but it's basically designed for the digital medium, and the database is constructed semi or automatically, but then released to the community as soon as it's linguistically evaluated as relevant. So that means that it's not just any automatically created resource is put to the community. We did an evaluation with the thesaurus and with the collocations dictionary that I'll present next. So we took the data, sample data, and the experts reviewed the quality, and then there had to be a certain percentage of reliable data that when the decision was made that this resource is useful for publication. And the part that I just shown, the community can contribute towards improving the resource. So it's a constantly evolving dictionary. And we have a clearly defined methodology of how to monitor that. So we log pretty much everything, not only contributions, but also what users click on. So not only the searches, but if you click on a collocation, if you select a collocation, if you go to corpus, everything is logged. Everything is logged and then systematically analyzed. So the data evolves and the database is openly accessible under an appropriate license. Now, we have also information whether this works, because the question is always, will user respond to this? Because they might not even appreciate the voting and everything else. But as you can see here, this is the statistics from last year to the latest data we have from the end of April 2019. And I think the next chart shows it a bit more clearly. So the user synonyms and the user upvotes, so the suggested synonyms and the voting has picked up since the dictionary was published. You can see that the downvotes, so negatively voted synonyms have only increased slightly. And something that is very common in the crowdsourcing world is that users, so the number of users that are actively participating is gradually growing but not really spiking, which means there is always this community of users that like to contribute. Okay, but we went one step further and we got some funding also to do a survey of how what the users think of this way of making a dictionary. So we did a questionnaire, an online questionnaire that had 7 questions, very short one, and we got a very good response rate. So 671 users responded. In total, actually, we had nearly 1,000 questionnaires, but they were not fully completed. And these numbers are quite comparable with the study by Miller, Spitzer, and others from 2014. So, the question was, what is your opinion on these 14 features? Okay, so the colors will assist us in analyzing this. So the redder it is, the more negative. So if it bothers them, it's red. If they are not really, if they are indifferent, it's yellow. If they like it, it's green. So here you can see that we sort of put forward a few statements. So the dictionary exists only in the digital form. They are fine with that, and also the dictionary is never truly finished. They seem to understand that language is changing, that the dictionary should also evolve. The dictionary content is frequently updated. Now this really is in line with the answers obtained from the European Dictionary Survey. The dictionary database is available and the dictionary is free. So that's, of course, again in line with the results. Everybody likes that. It's a bit different than when you talk about certain content features. So initially, in the first part, we decided to exclude domain labels. We have them available, but we wanted to have a closer look at them. So when we released the dictionary, we didn't include them, but clearly the users missed them. So that we know is one of the features we want to focus on in the future. And the second thing is that then there are features like corpus examples collocations. They also like that, and it comprises primarily standard and contemporary language. Now, there is also a bit of red. So users can rate synonyms. That's also nice to see that they like that feature, and they can add their own suggestions. They're indifferent. So the University of Ljubljana is not primarily lexicographic. It's now getting sort of really that status among the community, and the users don't really mind. They don't seem to think that the really specifically lexicographic institution should be behind such resources. And then the question, of course, that's really interesting is sort of the data are not entirely reliable. So quite many people said that it bothers them. And it's not unexpected, because if you say I have a dictionary but it's not entirely reliable, they would react to that. However, and I want to test this actually in some other survey, I wonder what would happen if I put this question for an existing dictionary and I say, do you know that some of the entries date back 40, 50 years and the data is probably not totally reliable? So, the question probably deserves more context, but in this case, it's also something that we had to consider, especially when I'll talk about the next resource. And it sort of it doesn't really, it's not consistent, the next answer, because they don't mind if data is acquired automatically. So then they don't mind that. It was just the reliability. So just to go to the collocations dictionary, because that's in line with the sort of related to the question on reliability. So this was on collocations. There was a lot of research done already on extracting collocations automatically, on extracting dictionary examples for collocations automatically, and this on the right is the list of top 10, so the most frequent grammatical relations, and the sort of evaluation of reliability of data. So how much noise did we find and how much good data? So you can see that at the top, the most frequent ones, there's about 9 in 10 collocations are good. Of course, this is not across every headword. It's actually very different in certain headwords depending on the corpus annotation problems and so on. So we created collocations dictionary as well. So the fully automatically created resource with nearly 36,000 headwords, 7,700,000 collocations and 36 million examples. And mainly targeted it for native speakers, but also for students of Slovene as a foreign language. Of course, in line with our principles, also openly accessible database and with regular updates. And we also had to think closely about the interface, but I don't have time to go into detail about that. However, I want to show you one thing that were slightly different from the thesaurus. So first thing, you can see again that you can vote. So the users can vote and say, there might be something wrong with the data. We don't allow input at the moment because synonyms probably a bit more easier concept to understand than collocation. That's something we also tested. So we tested whether users can understand what a collocation is, and it's we have a different method here. It's more of a gamified method that we want to implement. But more importantly, here we had to give some information about the entry because the entry is building up and being published not from beginning and end, but in stages. So here you have first we give the information of the last update of the entry. So each entry has a timestamp. Dictionary has an own version, but each entry has a timestamp. So you know when it was last updated. And importantly, it has also this pyramid where we show the stage. And these stages are sort of phases. There are 5 of them. So you start at the bottom where you have the fully automatically extracted information. Then we post-process it. We remove the parts that we know already from analysis that are probably less reliable. And then this is the third part where the human intervention starts to happen when the senses are devised and then towards the completion at the top. So this was the sort of the next stage where we said, okay, the users will know this was automatically created, but we can start giving them information at what stage of reliability the entry is. So to sort of summarize the responsive dictionary, the model that we are trying to adopt in Slovenia, or that we have adopted already. So it's the immediate publication of all the entries in different phases of completion, but we clearly indicate at which stage each entry is and the date of the last update. And this is especially useful to apply for dictionaries made from scratch, but I would argue that you can also start thinking about existing dictionaries, because when you start updating, for example, let's say you have a dictionary of contemporary language where the examples are all quite old or they're from several decades back, you can say, well, we will add new examples, the more contemporary ones automatically, but we will somehow indicate that to the user. So I don't think that, users would welcome new examples. You have to just indicate that how they were extracted and when the human checks them. But the big advantage of the dictionary is that it can respond to language change. And it can basically, it embraces users to help with that. But more importantly, and this sort of rounds up the, sort of brings me back to my title. So it sort of merges the effort of lexicographers and users and brings the dictionaries and users closer together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iztok. We have now a few minutes time, more than 10 minutes actually, for questions or comments or so on. Please.
Thank you, Iztok. I have a question about the crowdsourcing part of it.
Yes.
When you talk to people about crowdsourcing, there is a certain amount of skepticism around.
Yeah.
A sort of, it is a plan B, something that you can do if you lack funding. So I wonder if you're aware of any studies that have tried to evaluate the quality of crowdsourcing results. Are there, you said that it's good for certain limited tasks.
Yes, I mean that's actually the, well, first of all, to respond to the part about negative, I think the one thing that we are also experiencing is this negative sound of the word. So we are currently, I'm involved in a cost action that's working with crowdsourcing techniques related to language learning materials. So, and we are conducting surveys among teachers, and what you start to see is that really, when you say crowdsourcing, it has this negative sound to it. As soon as you start explaining how that might work, people get a completely different opinion about it. So we, in this cost action, we in fact did an experiment where we showed, we asked the people in the action to do a proper crowdsourcing task, and then we had a workshop where they expressed their opinion. And once they had this first-hand experience, their opinion completely changed. So if you were to, and I think even in some cases people will use a term citizen science, which sounds much nicer, and it's often quite a similar thing. There is a difference though, in that respect that, so if I was to conduct a quick survey around, even before you came to this talk, and I would say, what do you think crowdsourcing is? And then, oh, people contributing, and people often have this notion that a single person will contribute. So a single person will change my dictionary entry. And that is not really the case. I hope I made this point clearly. It's actually, so you have a people voting, and you start saying when a crowd agrees on something, a big crowd, you determine what limit is that, then you accept it. And the evidence of that working out is been, there's a lot of evidence in the NLP community, but also it's starting to, so it's being done at Dutch Language Institute. We have conducted several experiments. I must say that I didn't have time to go into all the detail, but we have successful stories, but we have unsuccessful experiments that were reported but not implemented in practice. So collocations, for example, is one of them. We tried to do that via crowdsourcing. It didn't work. What it does work, for example, is examples. So people are very good. If you ask them, I have 3 senses in a dictionary, I have an example, to which sense does this example belong? And they are very good at that. They just, and there's actually 3 benefits. One is they assign example under the sense. Second, they tell you this is not a good example or is not enough context. So that tells you something. And thirdly, when they cannot decide, so they say, I'm not sure, that is something that lexicographers have always been missing, this feedback whether the sense division is clear. Because we know that lexicographers are good at sense division, but you always then sometimes get the feedback, well, I cannot really distinguish between these 2 or 3 senses. And in this case, for us, this was something we had to learn, that we get this feedback and are able to improve the sense division. So there is evidence around, and actually it's been implemented more and more. We have to thank you, Iztok, once again.